It was a Tuesday evening when everything changed. I had just wrapped up a 10-hour shift at the accounting firm in Cedar Falls. The office was quiet, almost peaceful, the kind of stillness that settles after everyone's gone home. I was finishing up a quarterly report, double-checking numbers out of habit more than necessity. Precision is second nature when you've been in the game as long as I have. That's when my phone rang. I saw the name Mark, and for a split second, I expected something normal. Maybe a "what's for dinner?" Or "can you pick up milk on the way home?" Something mundane. Instead, his voice came through flat and unfamiliar. Cold, like he was reading from a script he'd rehearsed too many times. "Rachel," he said. No emotion. "I'm leaving. I've met someone else. Jessica. She's younger. It just makes sense now." I didn't say anything. I just listened. "And just so you know," he continued, almost like he wanted to hurt me with it, "I've moved the inheritance into my name. You'll get what's fair, but I'm handling it now." That's when everything around me stopped. My body didn't move. My mouth didn't open. But inside, something shifted. Fast and sharp. The way your gut drops when you realize someone isn't just careless. They're calculated. Still, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar rise up in me. Clarity. I hung up without a word. Sat there for a few seconds, just breathing. The air in that office suddenly felt thinner, colder. My hands trembled. Not from fear, but from restraint. Years of emotional muscle memory kicking in. Mark didn't know it, but the moment he made that call, he didn't break me. He woke me up. You don't get to your mid-40s without seeing patterns. And with Mark, the pattern was always the same. We'd been married 22 years. From the outside, we looked solid. Family holidays, mortgage payments, shared routines. But underneath that picture-perfect life was a long string of financial disasters, all courtesy of my husband's impulses. He was reckless with money, not in the flashy, gambler, David Gastable kind of way. It was more subtle. Credit cards maxed out on things we didn't need. Short-term business ideas that burned through savings, unexplained withdrawals, late fees, always some misunderstanding with the bank. And every time I fixed it, quietly, I'd reroute funds, negotiate payments, move things around. I'd spend late nights combing through statements, plugging holes he left behind like a financial firefighter. I never told anyone, not my sister, not my best friend, not even my therapist. I just handled it, because that's who I was, the responsible one, the numbers person, the fixer. And I stayed, even when I knew better. Looking back now, I think part of me believed that loyalty would eventually earn me peace, that if I just kept the household running, he'd grow up, straighten out, maybe even appreciate me. Instead, he stole from me. He stole what was left to me by the only man who ever taught me what protection really meant. My Uncle Harold. That inheritance wasn't just money. It was security, a safety net, a quiet promise that if everything else in life fell apart, I'd still be standing. And Mark tried to take that from me without a second thought. But what he didn't realize, what he never understood, was that I'd been preparing for this moment for a long time. I stood up from my desk, grabbed my coat, and walked out of the office without telling anyone goodbye. The air outside was thick with early fall, that crisp bite in the breeze that hints winter's on its way. In my car, I sat in silence for a few minutes, both hands on the steering wheel, eyes on the dark road ahead, not crying, not panicking, planning. That's when I said it out loud to no one in particular. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. And I meant it because I was done cleaning up his messes. The morning after Mark's call, I made coffee like I always did. 2 cups, even though one of them would go cold. Force of habit, I guess. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the maple tree in our front yard shed the last of its leaves. It had been there since we moved in, right after our wedding. Back then, I thought roots meant something. Now, all I could think about was how easy it had been for him to try and rip mine out. But the thing is, he couldn't, not really. Because 5 years ago, my Uncle Harold passed away and left me something that Mark would never truly understand. $600,000 and a lakeside cabin in northern Minnesota, tucked away from the world, quiet, peaceful, untouched. I'd only been there a few times, but just knowing it existed brought me comfort. Harold didn't just leave me money, he left me instructions. Legal ones, emotional ones, spiritual ones, in a way. His entire estate was protected through a firm called Vanguard Elite Private Banking, not your everyday bank. This place dealt with wealth management for people who'd seen betrayal up close and knew how to guard against it. Harold had been through a rough divorce years before. His ex-wife cleaned him out, left him bitter but wiser. He used to tell me, "Rachel, love without boundaries is just a slow robbery. Trust. That's the last currency worth anything." ... At the time, I thought he was being cynical. Now I see it differently. It wasn't warning me out of fear. He was preparing me for life. The trust he set up was no joke. It wasn't something Mark could just move into his name. It had layers, fail-safes, alerts, digital checkpoints. Think of it like a safe within a vault, within a fortress, and every key was mine alone. There were multi-factor authentications, trust-only permissions, and fraud response protocols that activated the moment someone tried to impersonate me or tamper with access. Mark never had a shot. His name wasn't on a single document. No access code, no rights, not even proximity. The most he could ever touch was our shared checking. And even that, I kept minimal. Just enough to pay bills and keep up appearances. What Mark thought he moved into his name was likely just a miscalculation. A sloppy one. A scare tactic, maybe. Or maybe Jessica had convinced him he was smarter than he really was. Either way, I wasn't going to correct him. I let him believe he won, because sometimes silence is more powerful than any argument. Well, I sat at home reviewing my portfolio and calling Vanguard to make sure everything was still in place. They confirmed it was Mark was out with Jessica, probably celebrating what he thought was a clean break and a new beginning. I imagined them sitting at a hotel bar somewhere, ordering overpriced cocktails. Jessica laughing at something Mark said, Mark playing the part of the charming runaway husband, pretending he was finally free. It was almost laughable. He had no idea what he'd set in motion. I didn't reach out, didn't warn him, didn't explain how badly he'd underestimated me. I just waited. That afternoon, I pulled out the manila folder. I kept locked in a filing cabinet in the basement. Inside were all the original documents Harold left me. His will, the trust agreement, contact info for Vanguard, even a personal letter he wrote the week before he passed. I hadn't read it in years, but that day I needed to. He'd written in his usual sharp, deliberate style. "Rachel, you're smart. Too smart to let someone bleed you dry. This trust isn't just about money, it's about dignity. Use it when the time comes. You'll know. And when you do, don't blink." I folded the letter and put it back. No tears, just resolve. Later that night, I got a text from Mark. "Don't be dramatic. Let's handle this like adults. I'll make sure you're taken care of." I stared at the screen for a second and smiled to myself. Not the warm kind of smile. The kind that says, "You still think you're in control." I didn't respond instead. I started drafting an email to my attorney. The storm was coming, and I was ready for it. The next morning started the same as the last. Quiet, slow, a little too still. I was back at the kitchen window, sipping my coffee, watching the early sun break through the clouds. There was peace in that moment, but underneath I could feel it. Something was about to crack. At exactly 7:18 a.m., my phone buzzed with a security alert from the bank. Fraud attempt detected, joint account access restricted. I didn't even flinch, just opened the message and started reading the details line by line. The way I would review a client's quarterly report.com/focused. It wasn't just the checking account this time. There had been 2 flagged attempts to bypass trust security protocols tied to my inheritance account. One came in through a fake call to Vanguard, someone claiming to be my financial advisor. The second was an in-person visit at a regional branch in Rochester, Minnesota. Someone walked in with forged documentation, trying to act as my legal proxy. That someone, of course, was Mark. I didn't need the report to tell me. I knew his patterns: overconfident, reckless, and just ignorant enough to believe the rules didn't apply to him. 15 minutes later, my financial advisor, Elaine Martin, called. She didn't sound panicked, she sounded sharp, professional, measured, like a woman who'd seen this kind of thing before and knew exactly how to handle it. "Rachel," she said, "we've got a situation, but it's under control." She walked me through what happened. Mark had impersonated one of her junior advisors over the phone, trying to get access credentials reset. The call was flagged immediately. Vanguard's system uses voice ID, and Mark's didn't match. That was strike 1. Strike 2 was his little field trip to the branch. He showed up with outdated account statements and some bogus legal paperwork, claiming he was acting on my behalf while I was hospitalized. "He told the branch manager you were in the ICU," Elaine said, almost amused. "Didn't think to check if you'd just made a transaction the day before." Of course, Vanguard didn't fall for it. They scanned the IDs, verified the records, logged the whole encounter, and reported it. Every detail, from the fake documents to the IP addresses from the phone call, was now part of an active fraud case. Elaine paused, then added something that stuck with me. Rachel, your uncle was paranoid but in the best way. His trust is so secure, it triggered a federal-level review automatically. That's not standard. He built it for war. I didn't respond right away. I just sat with that for a second. He built it for war. Harold always said trust was about more than money. It was about knowing someone would try to take it and making sure they couldn't. By 10:30 that morning, my phone had lit up with 8 missed calls and 3 voicemails from Mark. Each one more desperate than the last. The first sounded irritated, "Call me back. We need to talk about this account situation." The second was less composed. "Why is the checking account frozen? You can't just shut me out, Rachel." The third sounded frantic. "Are you seriously doing this? I made a mistake. Okay, but you don't need to get ugly about it." I didn't listen to the rest. There was nothing more to say. Instead of responding, I called Lauren Bell, my attorney in Des Moines. She picked up on the second ring. "I'm guessing this isn't a social call," she said. I gave her a rundown of what Elaine had told me. The fraud alerts, the impersonation, the attempt to hijack the trust. Lauren didn't interrupt. She just listened, typing as I spoke. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. "That's everything we need, Rachel," she said. "He just made this very easy for us." Could almost hear her flipping through legal tabs in her mind. "We've got attempted identity theft, misrepresentation, unauthorized access to a protected trust, and probable violation of federal banking laws. I'll have the paperwork ready within the day." I thanked her, then hung up and placed my phone face down on the kitchen counter. The house was quiet again, except for the soft hum of the fridge and the ticking of the wall clock. It was barely noon, but I already knew today belonged to the law, and tomorrow wouldn't belong to Mark. The next morning, I drove 2 hours to Des Moines in a light drizzle, windshield wipers ticking a slow rhythm against the glass. It wasn't the weather that made the drive feel heavy. It was the shift in me. I wasn't heading to see a lawyer just to protect myself. I was going to finish something, to draw a line in ink that would never wash away. Lauren Bell's office sat on the 11th floor of a gray high-rise downtown. No frills, no fluff, just glass doors, clean wood, and a receptionist who looked like she didn't flinch easily. That was a good sign. Lauren came out personally to greet me. Early 50s, sharp navy blazer, hair pulled back, not a hint of softness in her posture. Her handshake was firm, her voice even. No unnecessary smiles. She meant business. "Rachel Morgan," she said, gesturing me into her office. "Let's talk about your freedom." Her office looked like the kind of place where decisions got made. Shelves of legal volumes. A neat desk with the legal pad already open. A cup of black coffee sitting next to a Mont Blanc pen. I handed her a manila folder, thick with papers I'd been collecting for months. She opened it slowly, eyes scanning the tabs I'd labeled credit cards, transfers, texts, bait. Lauren didn't say much at first, just flipped through the pages like a surgeon studying hotel receipts, she said aloud. 2-night stays downtown Cedar Rapids. Same room, same billing name, not yours. "Nope," I said. She moved to the next section. Jewelry purchases, boutique charges, restaurant tabs, all neatly circled with dates and times. Consistent timeline, she noted. All while he was working late. Then she flipped to the bank transfers, $15,000 in total, spread across 5 transactions, all routed to an account in a different state under a generic-sounding business name. But the name on the wire authorization. Mark's. Lauren raised an eyebrow, looked up briefly, then went back to reading. Next were the text messages. "Here's where he started getting sloppy," I told her. "That's him fishing for my login info, claiming our account was frozen and he needed it for emergency access." She read through the screenshots. "You didn't give him anything." "No," I said. "I gave him this instead." I handed her the last section, a dummy bank statement I'd created, real enough to look official, fake enough to bait a lie. I'd listed a transfer that didn't exist, and watched as Mark later mentioned it like it had happened. That was how I knew he was snooping. Lauren actually smirked. "That's clever." I figured if he was going to play games, I might as well use it. When she finished reading, she closed the folder gently and folded her hands on top of it. "Well," she said, "you've built one hell of a case." She leaned back in her chair, eyes focused. "We have adultery with documented financial support. We have fraud, digital impersonation, attempted theft of a protected trust, and now identity abuse. Not just grounds for divorce, this is a full-blown legal assault. And if he wants to fight it, he's walking into a courtroom with a squirt gun. Double quotes ... I felt something release in my chest. Not quite relief, but something close to it. Validation maybe. She pulled out a thick form and started filling in boxes with my answers. Date of marriage, children none. Property owned jointly. Property separately held. When she got to assets in dispute, I stopped her actually. I said, "There's something else you should know." I reached into my purse and pulled out a scanned copy of Uncle Harold's trust clause. The specific line read, "in the event of deceit, fraud, or financial coercion within the marital unit. All spousal claims to these assets shall be void." Lauren read it twice. Then she looked up, eyes sharpened. "This clause just made everything airtight," she said. "He has no legal claim to that inheritance. None. Not with what he's already done. This isn't a negotiation anymore, it's a clean break." She printed the initial petition for divorce right there in front of me. No hesitations, no delay. I read every line, then signed it with the same kind of focus I used to reconcile our taxes. "Done, just like that. I'll file today," she said. "You'll be hearing from me within the week. In the meantime, say nothing to him. No reaction. Let the system speak for you now." I nodded, stood and shook her hand again. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You're welcome," she replied. "And Rachel, don't second-guess yourself. You're not just protecting your assets. You're protecting your peace." It didn't take long for Mark to realize things weren't going the way he'd planned. The morning after Lauren filed the paperwork, he tried to transfer money from our joint checking account. Just a simple online move, nothing big, but the screen froze. The transfer failed. A red notification popped up, "Access denied. Please contact your bank." He tried again. Same result. So he called. According to the records I'd later review with my bank, the representative didn't give him much. Just a vague, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm not authorized to disclose information on this account." Followed by a pause, "Then your name appears to be flagged in our system." That was new for him. Mark wasn't used to hearing no from anyone, let alone from a bank. A few hours later, he went in person. Walked into our local branch wearing his usual to casual attitude and a windbreaker zipped halfway up, like this was just another day. But this wasn't a routine visit, and the staff knew it. The manager didn't even let him get past the front desk. They asked for ID, verified it, then came back with a tight-lipped professional tone. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan, but we're unable to discuss this account with you." Mark, being Mark, probably raised his voice, probably threw around words like husband and joint access and entitled. But the manager didn't budge. Vanguard's fraud protocols were ironclad, and after the impersonation stunt, he pulled in Rochester. His name had been marked for internal escalation. That meant every branch visit triggered an internal alert and audio recording. He left empty-handed and furious. Back at the apartment, he was now sharing with Jessica. Things were starting to fall apart. According to a mutual friend who worked in the same office building, Mark came in late that afternoon looking like a man unraveling. His hair uncombed, his shirt wrinkled, muttering to himself on the phone while pacing the sidewalk out front. Jessica wasn't happy either. She hadn't signed up for chaos. From the moment Mark promised her a fresh start, he had painted a picture. Easy money, no strings, a quiet divorce, and a lakefront cabin someday. He made it sound like Rachel would just roll over and disappear. Now, the account was frozen. The trust money was locked behind walls, and Rachel wasn't responding to any of his calls or texts. Jessica started asking questions. The argument started small. According to the friend who lived 2 doors down from them, thin walls, raised voices. First, it was about what Rachel did, and how she always has to control everything. Then Jessica started pushing harder. "You said this would be easy. Mark, you said she was soft, that she wouldn't fight." "I didn't know she had this set up," he shouted back. "Did you even read the trust paperwork?" she fired. "Or did you just assume you could charm your way through it?" Mark, cornered and defensive, did what he always did when things slipped out of his control. He blamed someone else. "She's doing this to punish me. She's vindictive, always has been." "No," Jessica said. "Quieter now. She's prepared. You're the one who's scrambling." That night, as I sat on the couch reviewing emails for work, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it. "You're bitter and vindictive. No wonder he left you." No greeting, no signature. But I knew exactly who it was from. "Jessica," I stared at the message for a moment, not feeling anger or hurt, but something closer to detachment. Like reading the final page of a book you'd already lost interest in. I didn't reply. I just screenshot the message and forwarded it to Lauren with a simple note. "Adding this to the file." Lauren responded a minute later, "Got it. Thanks." This helps establish emotional harassment. Keep everything ... and that was it. No emotional spiral, no second guessing. Just another piece of evidence added to the growing pile. Another step toward the finish line. I thought back to the early years with Mark back, when I believed silence was strength and loyalty would somehow change him. Back when I thought fixing his mistakes would earn me peace, but now, peace wasn't something I had to earn anymore. It was something I was reclaiming. It was a quiet Thursday morning when I got the call. I was in the middle of reconciling vendor invoices at the office, sipping lukewarm coffee and half listening to the rustle of printers and muffled phone calls around me. My desk was organized, as always, receipts, paper-clipped, notes color-coded. Everything in its place. Then my cell phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code caught my eye. Federal? Mrs. Rachel Morgan, the voice asked. Professional.com. This is Agent Nicole Harding with the Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to speak with you regarding an ongoing investigation into attempted wire fraud and identity theft involving a Mark Morgan. I didn't say anything for a second, just stared out the window, letting it sink in. Of course, I replied. When and where? We met in a quiet conference room on the lower floor of my office building. 2 agents, both dressed in business suits that didn't scream authority but carried it nonetheless. No dramatic entrances, no badges thrown, just 2 professionals doing their job. Agent Harding did most of the talking. Her partner, Agent Lynn, observed, took notes, and occasionally chimed in with a question or clarification. We've received multiple reports connected to your trust account at Vanguard Elite, Harding explained. There was an impersonation attempt involving someone posing as your financial advisor, followed by an in-person incident at a branch in Rochester. I nodded. Yes, that would be my husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband. You've already identified him as the source, she asked. I didn't have to, I said, pulling out a folder from my tote bag. He left a trail a mile wide. I slid it across the table call logs, access alerts, copies of messages, screenshots of the fraudulent attempts. I even included a printed timeline of events that Lauren helped me prepare. The agents took their time reviewing it. You're unusually prepared, Lynn commented quietly. I'm an accountant, I said. I don't leave room for mistakes. What I didn't expect was what Agent Harding said next. This case isn't just about a bad husband or a bitter divorce, she explained. The impersonation combined with the attempted access to a federally protected trust account escalates this to a financial crime. Under Title 18, that includes potential charges of wire fraud, false representation, and attempted identity theft. She flipped through the documentation. It also appears he tried to manipulate the security systems at Vanguard posing as a legal representative, creating forged documentation, even giving false statements at the branch. He thought he could bluff his way through it, I said. Harding looked up. He couldn't. The trust your uncle set up included federal-level monitoring. That's rare. Most people don't build in that kind of defense. That caught my attention. What do you mean by federal level? I asked. She leaned back slightly, folding her hands. Vanguard Elite offers what's called a fail-safe escalation clause for certain accounts. Your uncle opted in. It means that if someone tries to impersonate you or breach the trust under suspicious circumstances, it doesn't just flag the account, it triggers an automatic compliance report to our division. Double quotes ... I blinked. So that's how you knew before I even filed a complaint. Exactly. The system did its job. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just sat there thinking about Harold. He'd always been overly cautious. Even back when I was a teenager. He didn't trust banks, didn't trust people. He always said, you never know who someone really is until they think they're entitled to your future. At the time, I thought it was sad paranoid even. Now, sitting across from 2 federal agents who were telling me that his trust design had not only protected me, but actively launched a criminal investigation, I saw it differently. His paranoia had saved me. And not just financially. It had saved me from years of litigation, emotional warfare, and legal gaslighting. Mark had walked straight into a trap, and the only reason it existed was because Harold saw this kind of betrayal coming before I ever did. The agents gathered the folder and thanked me for my cooperation. We'll keep you updated, Harding said. In the meantime, avoid contact with Mr. Morgan. If he reaches out, forward anything directly to your attorney or us. I stood up, shook their hands, and walked back to my office, feeling lighter, not victorious, not smug, just steady. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about protection, about boundaries. about finally seeing the full power of preparation play out when it mattered most. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. 3 days later, I was at home folding laundry when the notification lit up my phone screen. Breaking: Cedar Falls man arrested at airport on federal fraud charges. I tapped the article, expecting some vague headline. But then I saw their names in print: Mark Morgan and Jessica Carter. Arrested at the Des Moines International Airport while attempting to board a one-way flight to Mexico. The article was brief but direct. Federal agents, tipped off by a flagged passport, an open fraud investigation, had taken them into custody at the gate. Mark had tried to argue. Jessica had apparently cried. Neither of them made it onto the plane. They weren't going on vacation. They were trying to disappear. I stared at the article for a long moment, letting the silence settle around me. My laundry sat unfolded on the couch. A soft breeze drifted in through the open window. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's dog barked in the distance. And I just breathed. There was no thrill, no smugness, just a quiet confirmation of what I already knew. When you try to steal a future that doesn't belong to you, eventually the ground gives out. Later that day, Agent Harding called. They were under surveillance, she explained. His attempt to liquidate assets and his false statements triggered passport monitoring. Once he booked the flight, we expedited the warrant. He's now facing formal charges. She listed them out calmly, like it was just another line item on a to-do list. Attempted wire fraud, identity theft, false impersonation, violation of federal banking statutes. And Jessica? I asked. She's being held on conspiracy to defraud, Harding replied. Depending on how cooperative she is, that may shift. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. He really thought he could outrun this. They always do, she said, but paper trails don't lie. A week later, the divorce hearing was held in Polk County Family Court. I showed up wearing a navy blue dress and a steady expression. Lauren walked beside me, calm as ever, her leather briefcase already packed with everything the judge would need. Mark sat across the courtroom wearing a rumpled suit that didn't fit anymore. The arrogance was gone, his posture slouched. His hands kept fidgeting like he didn't know what to do without a phone to scroll or a scheme to spin. He didn't look at me once. Jessica wasn't there. She was still in custody. The judge reviewed the documents silently, page after page. I watched him pause at the trust clause, at the bank statements, at the screenshots of Mark pretending to be my advisor. It wasn't dramatic, no grand arguments, no shouting, just facts laid out in clear, cold order. Lauren barely had to speak. Our evidence spoke for itself. When the judge finally looked up, his tone was almost sympathetic, but firm. This court finds overwhelming evidence of financial fraud, attempted deception, and actions clearly intended to undermine the marital estate. As such, the following will be granted in full to the petitioner, Mrs. Morgan, ... He began reading the list: ... full ownership of the marital home, all retirement accounts and pension funds in her name. Sole rights to the inheritance trust and all its protected assets. No spousal support owed to the respondent. ... The gavel hit the bench like the closing of a vault. And just like that, it was over. Mark didn't say a word as I walked past him on my way out. I glanced once in his direction. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd been playing checkers on a chessboard. All that scheming, ... all that entitlement, ... and now he was facing up to 20 years in federal prison. It wasn't about revenge, not for me. This was about justice. About drawing a hard line between what someone thinks they deserve and what they're actually entitled to. Mark had bet on the idea that I would break down, that I'd panic, that I'd crumble under pressure. Instead, I prepared. I documented. I listened to my instincts, and I won not just legally but personally. That night, I sat out on the back porch with a glass of wine, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. For the first time in a long while, my house felt quiet in the right way. Not hollow, not tense, just still, ... The way peace should feel. I looked up at the stars and thought of Harold, his warnings, his stubborn insistence that I'd be ready even when I didn't think I needed to be. Turns out, I needed every single safeguard he left behind, and I would never again mistake that kind of caution for paranoia. It was quiet. The kind of quiet you don't notice at first, until you realize your body isn't tense anymore, until your shoulders finally drop, until the noise in your head finally fades. I sat at the edge of the dock behind Uncle Harold's cabin, my bare feet dangling just above the surface of the lake. It was late afternoon, the water was still. A few birds drifted overhead, and the trees swayed with the gentlest breeze. the reflections rippling slightly on the surface, like memories in motion. This place had once felt like a backup plan, a relic, something to visit on holidays or long weekends. Now it felt like mine. Not because the paperwork said so, but because I'd earned this stillness. I'd earned the right to breathe again. It had been 6 weeks since the divorce was finalized, since Mark's arrest, since the courtroom closed the book on a story he never thought would end this way. I hadn't heard a word from him. Jessica had vanished from the headlines after accepting a plea deal, and me, I'd quietly handed in my resignation at the firm and taken a leave of absence to figure out what came next. I wasn't in a rush. I'd spent 22 years cleaning up messes, patching holes, sacrificing my own rest just to keep someone else's world from falling apart. Now, for the first time, the only thing I had to manage was my peace. The phone rang beside me. I picked it up without checking the caller ID. I knew who it was. "Hey," Lauren said. Her voice was calm, almost cheerful. "You sound relaxed," I replied. "I figured I should call you myself," she said. "No more paperwork, no new motions, no sudden appeals. Mark withdrew everything. It's over, Rachel. Officially." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting those words sink in. "It's over," I repeated softly. "Start your next chapter," she added. "And if you ever open that accounting firm we talked about, you'd make a damn good advocate for women who don't see it coming." I smiled. "Already thinking about it," I said. After we hung up, I reached into the leather folder I'd brought with me and pulled out the letter. Harold's final letter. I'd read it before, but now, in this moment, with the lake calm and the future wide open, I read it differently. His handwriting was still strong, neat, intentional. "Rachel, if you're reading this after I'm gone, I hope life has been kind to you. But if it hasn't, if you're holding this because someone tried to take what's yours, then I want you to remember something. Peace of mind is the real wealth. You can rebuild money, you can fight for property, but peace is priceless. Use what I've left you to build something beautiful, something strong, something that's yours all the way down. And if someone ever underestimates you, smile. That's the first step to winning. Uncle H." I folded the letter back carefully and slipped it into the folder. Then I looked out across the lake and let the wind carry those words somewhere deep. Something beautiful. That's what I wanted now. Not just survival, not just a clean slate, but something meaningful. I had already started sketching out a business plan. Nothing flashy. Nothing corporate. Just a boutique firm. One that specialized in asset protection for women going through divorce. Women who were being lied to, manipulated, blindsided just like I had been. Not everyone has a Harold in their life, but I could be someone's version of him. Someone who knew what betrayal looked like in the fine print. Someone who could help draw the line between love and exploitation. As the sun began to dip lower behind the trees, I reached down and touched the surface of the lake with my fingertips. The water was cold, but clear, steady, like me. There would be more decisions to make, more plans to form. But for now, I just sat there in the quiet, letting it hold me like a promise. Because peace wasn't something that came to you. It was something you fought for. Something you prepared for. And when it finally arrived, it didn't look like fireworks or applause. It looked like this. A woman on a dock, at the edge of a lake. No longer surviving, just living, building something beautiful.